Hello and welcome to the EggBanana podcast. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Mark.
And I'm Edward.
So you visited Taiwan, fell in love. Now, how do you stay here long term?
Entering and staying in Taiwan is not as easy as it used to be. What are some of the ways you can stay in the country legally? So Mark and Ryan, it was very interesting, as well as the listeners out there. When I first came to Taiwan, you're just taking everything in, but then you have to kind of realize, like, how am I going to stay here past, I believe it's 90 days on the landing visa. Correct, guys?
That's correct.
And so you're kind of thinking, like, your mind is racing. So at that time, I was just like, okay, what does every foreigner do when they first come to Taiwan? In my mind, it was teach English. So I went about just getting a job as soon as I can. Otherwise, I'd have to do a visa run. So that was basically my mindset as soon as I got here. Start to look for a job immediately. And that was like definitely on my priority list, I would say. Mark, how about yourself? What was your mindset or mentality when you first came here?
Well, I have to say, with Taiwan, it's really convenient for Americans because for a lot of other countries, you have to apply for a visa before you even go to that country.
Oh, is that true? Okay. I didn't know that.
So with Taiwan, Americans just can book a flight and just come here, and then they'll stamp your visa with a 90-day visa. So very, very convenient, and I really love it. So for me, though, it was kind of interesting. So I booked a ticket, came to Taiwan, and then tried to figure out how to stay here. So I actually applied for a student visa. I studied at Fongjia Dashi, Zhezhongwen. And what was interesting was to get the student visa, I had to go to Hong Kong to the Taiwanese embassy, I guess.
Consulate, maybe?
Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like thinking to myself, why couldn't I just do that here in Taiwan? So it was like really weird, but it's the rules or policies. So, but I remember, I had to go to Hong Kong, and I had to do it all in one day. But now I heard you can't do that in one day. You have to at least stay overnight. So got my student visa, came back. And so, but my student visa was technically just a visitor visa, stayed for 90 days. But after every semester, I re-enrolled. So I had to go to the embassy and just renew my student visa again. So I did that for about a year and a half. And then after that, I just started studying Chinese on my own and just started kind of staying in Taiwan on a tourist visa. So, and I did that for several years. So every 3 months or 90 days, I had to leave. And so I would often actually go to Osaka, Daban, and then come back. So that was kind of my situation for several years until I actually got a job last year and got a working visa. So luckily, I don't have to leave now every 3 months. So,
can I ask a question? I'm sure the listeners out there would like to know as well. When you first came here, were you just kind of, I guess, taking the sights in, and you didn't really want to aggressively look for a job, or you did, and then nothing happened at that time? I guess because you said it took a little while, right?
Yeah, it was a long time ago, and I can't quite remember exactly what was I thinking when I first came to Taiwan. But a friend I was staying with recommended me to take Chinese classes at the university instead of studying Chinese on my own. And so through that, I just got the student visa. So did that answer your question? I'm not sure.
Yeah, sure, kind of. I guess, for my situation, it was like as soon as I got here, I was like, okay, I like not the biological clock, but my clock was ticking. I was like, I only have a certain amount because I didn't want to, because to do a visa run. In my case, I've only done really one visa run the entire time I've been in Taiwan for the 11 years. It was after the first 90 days had elapsed, I went to Hong Kong, and then I just realized after that, I'm not a rich guy. I'm not a Kardashian. I don't have money. So I tried to just always have a job on standby. So I guess my question was just kind of, it was interesting. I guess the first couple of years you just kind of were figuring the country out, taking the sights in, I guess is what I was inquiring about, I guess.
Well, the first couple of years I was actually studying Chinese.
Oh, you okay?
So,
So you were on a student visa.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And,
So
yeah. And I think it's an interesting point I just thought about. When you're on a student visa, because I was told this, you're not supposed to work at the same time, correct?
I guess so. I'm trying to think.
Okay.
I think I had a couple of my classmates work part-time jobs, but I don't know. I don't remember the policy.
They probably would have needed work permits, but
Right.
Then they probably maybe have worked illegally.
yeah, possibly.
Let's not get anyone in trouble.
Yeah.
Ryan, how about yourself? How did you conquer this issue that all non-locals have to face, basically?
Yeah, so I was living in Singapore at the time, and I started having the feeling that I wanted to improve my Mandarin. So I started visiting Taiwan. I came here for like 2 weeks and then a month and another couple weeks and so on. And I just, I didn't really have any intention of moving here at the time. But then I started to get more involved with like the startup community. I met a lot of people here, and they told me about like the entrepreneur visa, which is one of the many visas that a foreigner could apply for. So actually, before I ended up moving to Taiwan, I already had my entrepreneur visa and my ARC. So it was kind of like a fast track. Since I had my own company in Singapore, and then getting this entrepreneur visa, it also allowed me to set up a company here. So yeah, the process was all pretty simple. Renewing it's a different story, but yeah, I've already renewed it once. So I had 1 year, and then I got another 2 years. And now I heard recently that if you've been here for 3 years, you can then apply for permanent residency. So I think that's my plan right now.
Right. So I think ARC, that acronym stands for Alien Residence Card. Is that something right? Is that right? Or am I off there?
I think it's actually Alien Residency Certificate.
Thank
although
you.
it
That
is
sounds more proper.
Although it is a card.
Right.
Yes.
So for the listeners out there, in case you want to know, in Chinese we call it 居留证. Mark, is that right?
I have no idea.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So the ARC, it's pretty interesting. For the people who have not been in Taiwan, it's basically it kind of looks like, I would say, a driver's license, but then it has like an expiration date. It's usually 1 year or 2 years, depending on the company. I'm just actually curious because I've never done it myself. I'm sure some of the listeners haven't, Ryan. Like, what, if you're allowed to talk about, like, what criteria or qualifications do you need to meet in order to attain the entrepreneurship card or visa? Sorry.
Yeah, it's actually started to get more strict since COVID and since the borders closed. There are different types of visas. Like there's the like seeking work visa, business visa. There's another thing called the gold card. Gold card's pretty popular. I guess the program's been around for 3 or 4 years now, and it allows people to stay here for 3 years. I think renewal was coming up soon for a lot of people, and they were trying to figure out how they would stay here or how they would renew. And then the 3-year to permanent residency track would also apply to them. So that way they don't even need to think about renewing their gold card. They could just apply for a permanent residency right away. But for entrepreneur visa, now you have to write up a business plan, and you need to kind of let them know why you came to Taiwan, what you're going to do. There's not necessarily like an investment amount, like a set amount of capital or anything that you have to inject into the company when you start up. But that comes later. So like if you want to renew after the first year, then there's certain criteria that you have to meet. Like you have to either hire employees, you have to hit a certain amount of revenue for the year. There's some other things there, but yeah, it's been actually pretty difficult for a lot of people that I know who are on the entrepreneur visa to renew. So a lot of them are starting to look into other options like the either gold card or some people talked about recently they've been setting up like a business here or even a branch office if they have a company overseas, and then they just hire themselves and issue themselves basically like a work visa, and then that will allow them to stay here.
Right. I think one distinction I just thought of while you guys were talking is so there's basically the ARC, which has kind of a expiration date on it of like either a year or 2 years, depending on the company. But then there's something called APRC, right? Which is basically, I believe, after you have been working for a span of over 5 years and you make a certain salary amount, you're able, it's kind of like an ARC, but it never expires as long as you stay in Taiwan. I think it's 183 days of the year, right? Something like that.
That sounds right.
Okay. And then basically with that, it's like, with the good thing about that is with that, you're not kind of, you don't have to be working at a job in order to stay. You could be, unemployed at the time or take your time or, never work again, I guess. So I don't know. Mark, was that kind of something that you were looking at in the, not the near future, but one day?
Kind of, yeah. I would like kind of work towards that goal. And I have heard, yeah, you had to work 5 years, nonstop, I guess.
Yes.
And during that time, you also have to, like, from what I heard, make or pay a certain amount of tax from that income. So, but I think Ryan just mentioned there was an announcement that the government was going to change that 5 years to 3 years.
Oh, okay. So it might work out in your favor then.
Maybe, but we'll see. Was that an announcement or was that finalized?
I think it was something talking about that a bill had passed or it's about to pass, something like that. But it sounded pretty finalized. But it was like just maybe within the last 2 to 3 weeks or something that this news came out. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it's not just working for 5 years straight or 3 years straight, but it's like being on any one of the like non-tourist visas aside from student visa for 3 years consecutive period. And then, yes, you would need most likely at least 1 year of like your tax filings or whatever to show that you did pay tax in the country. I don't think that they need anything other than that. I don't think there's a minimum salary requirement or anything, but I could be wrong.
Really? Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's like if you were on a business visa or work visa for 1 year and then you, for some reason, let it expire, and then 1 week you went onto a tourist visa and then back to a work visa, then you would start over, basically. You would have to, that time would be all wasted. It has to be consecutive.
I heard that that's happened to some of my friends where like if they don't work for a period of time, it kind of resets the clock, correct?
Yeah, I had to start over again. So, and Ryan, I think you had mentioned something about, or both you, Ryan and Edward, mentioned something about the gold card.
Yes.
So it's kind of interesting. Like I've been here in Taiwan like several years already, 5 or 8 years, and only since last year I heard somebody mentioning about this gold card. And basically, because of this pandemic, I know a lot of foreigners who had come to Taiwan were trying to stay here as they were like here on a visitor visa or tourist visa. So that was kind of interesting. And Ryan, do you know the requirements for the gold card?
Yeah. I think one of the main requirements, although that they are starting to change it a bit to allow more foreign talent to come into the country, I think it was something like you have to show that you earned a minimum of like 150 or 160,000 NT per month.
Like a bank statement, right?
Like your pay slips, I think.
Okay.
Or it could be your bank account. Maybe that might also
that's what I heard.
Be okay.
I don't know.
But something showing that you earned a certain salary the past, I think, year. I don't know if it's more than 1 year, but you need to show that you earned that, because what that tells them is that, and I think it's around $5,000 US or something like that, or maybe a little more per month. They just feel that anyone who earned that amount would be like a working professional or a highly skilled professional, although they don't really take into consideration like people in New York and California, they're probably going to make more than people in Texas, for example. So someone who's paid that amount in Texas may have a different skill than somebody who's paid that amount in New York or California.
Interesting. Just a quick question. Well, I don't know, not question, but I just remembered before the pandemic, I had a friend. Speaking of tourist visas, he was also on a tourist visa, but he had overstayed just one day, and he told me the government pretty much kicked him out or banned him just for 1 year though. So, and he couldn't come back after 1 year. So, have you guys ever heard of anyone who maybe have overstayed their visa? Or
I've heard of stories of, maybe a person was working at a place illegally, and then they were caught by some people, and then they kind of get booted from the country and then blacklisted for a little while. But I don't know about the 1 day thing, because I think before, unless I'm misremembering, I didn't find a job right away, and I was a couple days late to process the forms, and I was fine. I had to pay a couple, I think maybe 1,000 or 2,000 NT. Thankfully, that's never happened to me or anyone that I'm close to, but I've heard of stories of people, they were stupid, they overextended their stay by a significant amount of time, and then they were not, like you said, they weren't allowed to come back for a year or a couple of years, that kind of thing. Ryan, do you have any thoughts about this?
Yeah, I heard something about that as well, like Taiwan being pretty strict about that, that it could get you kicked out of here. I wasn't sure for how long, but other countries like Philippines, for example, it's very easy. You just pay a fine, or you can pay to extend your visa as much as you want. They gladly accept cash to extend your visas.
Yeah.
That was something that I thought was really interesting about Taiwan before COVID was, like you mentioned, like you could just come here and stay for like 90 days and then do a visa run like an unlimited number of times. And a lot of countries actually don't have that. Like, for example, like Singapore, you could do that twice. Once you reach 180 days, then you actually have to wait, I think it is 6 months before you can come back to the country.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if you don't have a proper visa, just as a tourist.
I heard that same policy is for Japan as well. When I studied Japanese there at Kyoto, I had a classmate from Hong Kong, and I guess her husband did that. Took two separate trips and stayed in Japan on a tourist visa. But I think the third time, I don't know what exactly happened, but he was told, like, yeah, you're only allowed to stay like 180 days, I think, and then you can't re-enter Japan until the following year.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds very similar to what you were talking about with Singapore.
I just thought of something when you guys were talking. There's a couple of things, like we've been talking about, like pre-COVID conditions to get in the country and then post. I would say now no one can really, I think we probably mentioned it in the COVID in Taiwan episode, but basically no one can just come in off a tourist visa now. I think they have to either have a job, they have to be a Taiwanese citizen or diplomat maybe. And then the other thing that I thought was interesting is people, besides legally allowing us to stay there, why would you want that? If you get an ARC, then you're able to get a health insurance or Genbaka, right? So I think that's a very important thing. And then for me, I don't want to do a humble brag, but it's interesting. I've lived on both sides. When I first came to Taiwan in 2010, I came in on at that time I didn't have Taiwanese citizenship or passport. And then I just decided to just keep getting my ARC, which is kind of like, it's okay, but then you're kind of, I don't want to say beholden to a company, especially if you're near the cutoff date where you're like, okay, my ARC is about to expire. I have to either stay with this company or I have to find something else right away, or the clock starts ticking, right? Now I am a dual citizen, so then it kind of just makes things easier where, like, I could be homeless. I could just do whatever I want. And Taiwan can't get rid of me. So I think that's kind of interesting.
So being a dual citizen, did you have to do any military time?
I knew you were going to say this. I would love to say that I served Taiwan proudly, but I did not.
You were already in the U.S. Army, right?
Navy SEALs. No, no, I'm just kidding. No. I do have to say, whenever I encounter anyone who served in the military, I'm always like, thank you for your service. No, I did not serve in the military in the U.S. And then this is probably another topic, but I've heard of people who are like me. Maybe they grew up in the States, but technically they were born in Taiwan, and they went to the Army. And no offense, guys out there, but they told me it was like 很无聊 or very boring, actually. So I had no... should I say this on the podcast? Yeah, why not? Okay, for you guys out there, I will say this. Basically, I had no intention of going to the Army, and I did not want to go. So basically, I waited until I was 36 or 37, which is deemed too old. And then it was interesting because at that time, from what I heard from other people or what I read, I would have to kind of, I think, apply for something. I forgot if it's like get an ID or get a passport first, and then not leave Taiwan for a year. I thought that was the standard to eventually get to Taiwanese citizenship. But actually, I was talking to someone, and it turns out all you have to do, I don't know if this is still the case, is what I did a few years ago. I just went to Hong Kong. You go to their immigration office, maybe, and bring the necessary documents, birth certificate, that kind of stuff. I went there with my sister-in-law because just in case if the Chinese, if it's too difficult, I guess, she was there to help me out. And basically, after a weekend, I came back in. I didn't show them my American passport. I showed them the documents I got, went back in, got my ID and my passport right away. So now it's been smooth sailing. So, yeah, I love it. And then I think what we have failed to mention, we've talked about work visa, right? We've talked about student visa. There's the obvious, if you fall in love with someone, right? So that's another way, right? Mark, any thoughts about that?
Marriage visa?
Yeah.
Spouse visa?
Well, that would be nice, but I would like to actually fall in love and marry with someone that I fell in love with, not just
to stay in Taiwan.
Yes. So
yeah. This marks the end of the episode, which also marks the end of season 1. We want to thank all the listeners out there for all your support.
Please be sure to like, subscribe, and follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram.